Okay, I just wanted to talk about the Quaternion mathematics that are for non-commutativity. So there was a great talk by a professor lady, a woman from India. I think her last name is Gupta. And I will give the link in the video description. And she goes through the history of Quaternion mathematics and how that led to David Hestenes' analysis of antimatter as actually based on the 720 degree torus or non-commutative torus to explain the electron being made from a photon. And so as a B.G. Siddharth explains, this is a two-dimensional process of time and frequency of the future and the past as a superluminal non-locality. And so in terms of quaternions, Siddharth, he cites Lou Kaufman, the math professor whom I have corresponded with. And Lou Kaufman has this great concept of explaining the imaginary number as a iterant process of algebra as an asymmetric time shift or flowing process. And so the equation is just I as the imaginary number equals I divided by -1. And so normally people learn the imaginary number as I equals the square root of -1. But in this case, you have I squared equals +1 or -1. But because it's a non-commutative process, then since it takes time to make an external measurement, therefore the algebra proves that you end up with this process of I equals I divided by -1 as the basis for the square root of -1. And so in terms of quaternions, you have that I process as a cubic time dimension of cubic time that's also non-commutative. So it has that asymmetric flip in time, and then it's multiplied by the 2x2 matrices of the quaternions of. So in the matrices you just have 0 and 1 or 0 and -1, and then you have 3 different 2x2 matrices. And so this is the basis of non-locality that's used for quantum teleportation signals that Jean Brimon refers to. He cites who was the, can't remember the scientist he cites, but the as basically this is a profound revolution in science, is the use of non-locality as proven by Bell's inequality as the basis for the Nobel Prize in Physics this year. That enables these non-local signal, or it's not a it's some kind of instantaneous action of information that's beyond just a correlation, because it has actual information to it. It's used as technology. And so normally in terms of non-locality, this is not thought of as a time signal, because there's no reference frame for the non-locality. And normally in science, the time is defined as a parameter of the spatial reference frame. So this is what Lou Kaufman calls primordial time, and then Lee Smolin calls it fundamental time. And that's the phrase that Roger Penrose also uses, fundamental time. And then Alain Kahn calls it primitive time. So you have this flowing of time as an asymmetric time shift of I equals I divided by -1, and then that cubic time is the Quaternion matrices of 0 and 1 and 0 and -1. So you have the 2x2 matrices, and then you multiply them by, each of them get multiplied by this process of I as an algebraic, non-commutative or asymmetric, eternal process. And since it's an asymmetric time and frequency, this is also what Alain Kahn calls 2-3 infinity, because it's explained as a factorization that's non-commutative. And so the music theory actually demonstrates that the Hilbert space as a exponential spectrum with a geometric dimension of 0 actually has a deeper factorization that he calls an infinity of infinite degrees, that's due to this non-commutativity. So the Hilbert space is actually a subset of the non-commutativity as non-locality. And so as 2-3 infinity, it's just explained by the basic music theory process of the 0 and the 1 that then turns into the 2 as the octave, and then naturally has the 3 as the overtone. But as soon as you have the 3 and the 2, then all of a sudden you have to change the value of the 0 and the 1 as the root tonic or fundamental tone. And Alain Kahn explains this by referring to the spectral theory of the paper by Mark called Can You Hear the Shape of a Drum? And so that's actually cited in the online analysis of what is spectral theory used for the quantum spectroscopy that Heisenberg discovered is non-commutative frequency and time of the Ritz-Rydberg combination principle. And so this Quaternion math is before, it actually explains the spinors, and that's what this lady, Professor Gita, she explains in her lecture that the Quaternion math from the 1800s is actually before vectors. It's actually, so if it's before vectors, it's also before tensors and then before scalars. But even though it's older than all of those other mathematics, it actually explains this, the spinor, the Quaternion math of the process of I equals I divided by -1, then has this asymmetric inherent time that is also protoconsciousness as non-locality. And so Basil J. Hiley explains that these mathematicians in the 1800s, they considered algebra to be pure consciousness as thought. And so the algebraic mathematics exists in pre-space, that process is going on before space-time exists. And so you can have the future and the past overlapping. And so the non-locality actually exists in this non-commutative fundamental time that then Roger Penrose explains is from before the Big Bang. And B.G. Siddharth also explains that this is the secret of black holes, because the Hawking radiation is actually this same quantum non-locality of the energy going into the black hole, the matter turning into photon energy and then being entangled with the Hawking radiation as the black hole evaporates. So the mass returns to its frequency origin as pure time and frequency. And so B.G. Siddharth explains that this is a two-dimensional process as a holographic universe of the photon that has no size. And so then this is experienced in quantum biology. So Basil J. Hiley explains that in quantum biology, because of the non-commutativity, there's no need to collapse the wave function. And so you can have this macro quantum resonance that Eddie Oceans, working with Lou Kaufman, realized is the secret of Neigong as internal alchemy in Chinese or Taoist martial arts, internal martial arts. But it's also the same as the three gunas of India, which is the oldest philosophy of India and used for Kriya Yoga and also for Vichara meditation or jnana yoga, the Vedanta or Advaita Vedanta tradition of Ramana Maharshi, and that's the same as Buddhist philosophy also. So you have this interpersonal, interdependent origination that's actually the void as the absolute void, because it's eternally radiating photons or light as a signal, as this non-local information it's not technically a signal, because normally in classical physics the signal is defined based on the energy as the amplitude squared, but in the non-locality you have just the frequency and the times. You have this negative frequency before the amplitude squared, and so it's based on the phase being superluminal. And so this was demonstrated experimentally by Gunther Nimps with his setting up a negative refractive index as a metamaterial type of superluminal sound signal, and where he literally sent a Mozart sonata at a superluminal phase velocity. And so this was first discovered by Louis de Broglie as what he called the law of phase harmony, based on relativity, because as Gerard de Hooft explains with Martin van der Mark in their Light is Heavy article, that because you can't contain light in a box due to the mass of light defined by the momentum as an eternal motion, then the gravitational mass of the light is due to the non-commutative space-time, as B.G. Siddharth explains also. So in other words, it's assumed that mass is measured by an average center of a space-time reference frame as a box, as a contained box. But since mass originates from frequency, as Roger Penrose explains, therefore the origin of space-time is actually this non-commutative fundamental time that's an asymmetric flowing, eternal flowing as protoconsciousness. That's the non-locality that's before a classical signal, and yet it's beyond just a statistical correlation, because you have this superluminal information that is then used in the quantum teleportation satellite system that my own quantum physics professor Herbert J. Bernstein designed, using this same non-commutative torus or donut secret of the 720 degree fiber bundle. So therefore the anti-electron or the positron as antimatter actually originates from what in weak measurement experiments is called the negaparticle, having a gravitationally repulsive force. So it's anti-gravity instead of being just antimatter. And that's the secret of the wormhole inside the black hole. It's not a classically defined wormhole, but it is a quantum, non-local, time frequency, non-commutativity. And so this is why you get levitation in deep meditation, as my own teacher, Chun-Yi Lin, then levitated after he did 28 days of non-stop full lotus meditation in a cave in Mount Qingchen, China. And so when he finished the cave meditation, he came right out of the cave and he was in full lotus meditation, and then he levitated as a spiral going up 9 feet. And he also described this space-time vortex or spiral when you overuse your Wan Qi energy. Then you experience when your spirit leaves your body, this causes a space-time vortex. So now we know why it's a spiral or a vortex of space-time, because the photon inherently has this gravitational mass from the non-commutative process of time and frequency. And so this is what I called, over 10 years ago, I was calling it the I-1-Eye, as the secret of the I-1-Eye, which is sort of like a pun, because the I is the I thought, because in meditation all your thoughts are based on your sense of I that then goes away in deep dreamless sleep. And so the Vichara philosophy is to listen to the source of the I thought, and by listening you therefore resonate directly with the non-locality as a superluminal information that's formless, or protoconsciousness, that's then been demonstrated and analyzed in the quantum biology research of Roger Penrose and Anirban Bandiopahe, who talks about this same negative frequency secret of superradiance in the microtubules and tubulin, as Professor Emeritus Stuart Hameroff first realized was the secret of this non-local quantum non-commutativity in the brain. Also, quantum physics professor Lawrence Domash, not Domash, but Domash. He was at Hampshire College, and then he was working for the Maharishi Transcendental Meditation Group, doing research for them, and he also realized that the non-commutativity was the secret of this super radiance in meditation, of as the what is the secret power of the mantra that the Maharishi yogi taught. They teaches this mantra practice. So at first you say a mantra externally, but then it becomes japa, and japa means you have this internal mantra in your mind, and then eventually you're logically inferring the source of the sound in the mind as the source of the I thought. And so the pun, the I-1-Eye, then also refers to the I as the imaginary number I, based on what Arthur Young also taught as the inherent asymmetric time process of the equilateral triangle inside the circle. So if you define the equilateral triangle using the number I as this process again of the square root of -1 from the I equals I divided by -1, then you end up resonating as a cubic time of the matrices of the quaternions. So you have the 0, 1, and 0 and -1 as 3 2x2 matrices, each of them multiplied by I of this as this I equals I divided by -1, which means I squared is the 1 or -1 at the same time as the future and the past overlapping. And so this is the secret of the holographic universe, of how then you get a positive volume of energy with a geometric space-time dimension of 0. And as Alon Khan explains, the Fields Medal math professor Alon Khan. And so we get this, we get the perception, our brain is then constantly creating this illusion of space-time from the positive, that originates from the positive volume of the energy that, is from the frequency of the photons, and the photons themselves experience no size, and therefore the external and internal space-time has a different reference frame in frequency that is not it violates the weak equivalence principle in relativity. So you can no longer have a simultaneous speed of light invariance to define the reference frame, because the secret gravitational mass of light is not defined by a symmetric average center of a box as the basis for space-time. That would then be mass. So the mass of light is inherently this asymmetric, or what I called it complementary opposites. That was my original phrase for it, was complementary opposites, before I even knew about non-commutativity. All I knew is that Alon Khan was using music theory to explain non-commutativity, which I've gone into many times before, about the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth and the octave. So the perfect fifth is 3 halves as an overtone, and then 2/3 as an undertone, but based on the pitch, it's C to G as an overtone, and then C to F as an undertone. And when you have the undertone as C to F, then you're able to derive the perfect fourth as 4/3 for the same scale of an octave. And then from that perfect fourth and perfect fifth, then you create the very first commutative geometry logarithmic equation of the perfect fifth plus the perfect fourth equals the octave. But you only can do that by lying about flipping the lyre around the musical instrument in order to hide the fact that you have used two different fundamental tones to create the perfect fourth within the same scale of space-time as the octave, and thereby calling it just a ratio of geometry as irrational magnitude, or what was originally called a logon, or the unutterable, as the square root of 2. So then the square root of 2 originates from the major second music interval of 9/8 that was originally from 9/4 as the squaring of the perfect fifth of 3/2 squared, so it's at an octave as 9/4, and then it's halved back into the same octave as 9/8, and then it's cubed to then get the tritone as a logarithmic interval that's a center of mass between the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth. And then Newton, it was proven in the 1960s that Newton was directly inspired by the music theory of Archytas to then create the inverse square law on the basis of that you square the weight on the string in order to double the frequency of the string. And so you have this inherent squaring of space-time as an increase of tension, and so this literally is an increase in the gravitational entropy on Earth as a acceleration of time that then collapses space into biological annihilation of all life on Earth, because life, as Erwin Schrödinger realized, life as protoconsciousness originates from this negative frequency as a gravitational potential or dark energy that powers the sun. So the true power of the sun, as Roger Penrose emphasizes, is not the atomic fusion, but it's actually the non-local process of protoconsciousness as the absolute void that's eternally radiating light. So the space-time is curved. The vortex of space-time is curved originally due to pure fundamental time as with frequency having this cubic time or imaginary time asymmetry as the fifth dimension. And so the future and the past are eternally overlapping as a superluminal information with the phase, a non-commutative phase of the negative frequency and the positive frequency. And so therefore the positron is not just negative energy that then is measured as a whole in the relativistic quantum Dirac theory, but it's actually, as David Hestenes first pointed out, the de Broglie law of phase harmony means that the electron originates with this wormhole, that a general relativistic vortex of space-time that then can resonate into the macro scale based on this 720 degree non-commutative torus of the fundamental time as the origin of the photon. And so all matter is actually made up of the photon, But the photon has this inherent gravitational mass from the non-commutative time and frequency that's a non-local, and in philosophy it's called non-dualism, meaning it's a undifferentiated triad of the 3-in-1 process that's not 2 because it's not symmetric. Because it's not symmetric, it's inherently a 3-in-1 or undifferentiated triad that in India is called the 3 gunas. And in Taoism, it's the yin-yang emptiness. And so that's the secret of the absolute void that then eternally radiates light from both internal perception and external measurements that, inherently have a difference in positive and negative frequency. And that's why when you see blue light internally when you're meditating, this then is absorbing the virtual photons as negative frequency because the light is being turned around that would normally be going out externally. And so you're literally accessing this quantum wormhole that's not classically defined. It's the time and frequency non-commutativity. And so this is why I also called it the I-1-Eye, because the I, the last I, is spelled E-Y-E as a pun on the third eye, or it's also sometimes called the fourth eye, which would be the psychic power from the yin qi, which is the negative ions in the blood. But that the yin qi then can be projected externally out of the third eye once the third eye opens up, and that's the psychic energy. The spiritual energy is the wan qi directly. So this is the difference between like special relativity and general relativity, because in general relativity you have this macro quantum curvature of space-time. And so the curvature of space-time originates from the mass of the photon that's from this non-commutative space-time. So this is what B.G. Siddharth is explaining, and he was the first to propose the acceleration of the universe from the dark energy. And so I call this the strong misanthropic principle, because in terms of cosmology, there's this argument of the Goldilocks effect, where all of the constants of science then enabled life to evolve on Earth in this solar system, and everything is perfect, and therefore we're able to discover these perfect constants that, it's a self-reflective process, as John Wheeler first argued. But the problem is that when you're using external measurements as a commutative geometry technology, then you have this exponential acceleration of destruction of life on Earth as biological annihilation, because every time you make an external measurement, the gravity waves are actually increasing the gravitational entropy through the technology that's required to make the measurement. And so this is what philosophy of science professor Harry M. Collins calls the alchemy of nothingness, because it's a negative result due to the calibration or increase in precision of the space-time measurement using the external technology that then increasingly calibrates a more precise measurement of space-time. And so this alchemy of nothingness originates from the square root of 2 liar, the lie of the liar, from Philolaus and Archytas, hiding the non-commutative, non-locality, and creating what's called the power axiom set in mathematics, so that the Pythagorean theorem is considered the most proven theorem in science, in mathematics. But it's actually a proof by absurdity, meaning that it's a negative proof. So you prove that the ratios are not rational, and therefore they have to be irrational as a logon. But when you assume this dualistic logic of the void, then you're only in the relative void and you're not in the absolute void. Whereas the absolute void is this undifferentiated triad of the 3 in 1 that's not 2. And so in quantum logic, that's called neither A nor not A, as a 3 in 1 quaternion asymmetric time shift. That's the source of the Cretan's paradox, the Cretan's liar paradox, that said all Cretans, what is it again? The Cretans said that all Cretans are liars. And so if the Cretan is telling you that he's lying, that all Cretans are liars and he's a Cretan, then you have what Bertrand Russell called the error of logical types, because it's in set theory, you have the set of no sets. And so the concept of set is assuming a symmetric space-time reference frame, whereas that's why it's a non-locality, because you don't have that. The causality violates the primitive causality that assumes a linear time. So the origin of linear time in space-time as entropy originates from this deeper non-commutative time and frequency that's actually a harmonization or a quantum coherent resonance as antigravity. That's the secret of life itself. So that's why I call it the strong misanthropic principle, because the more we fixate on the acceleration of the universe and the attempt to leave Earth and have interspatial warp drive technology as anti-gravity, the more we are actually destroying life on Earth by ignoring the non-commutative quantum truth of anti-gravity from the photons being the source of mass, and therefore also the source of antimass, or what's in the weak measurement of entangled photons, it's called the negaparticle, as a gravitationally repulsive force. So it's a newly discovered quality of energy that's the quantum potential in the Bohmian physics, and it is guiding the particle from the future as a non-local information. And this is the great profound discovery of Bell's inequality, is the determinant. It's not the deterministic aspect of the measurement process that includes the experimental conditions in the Bohmian model with the particle, and the with the double slit experiment, or the Stern-Gerlach experiment, or quantum tunneling, or the choice, the the delayed choice eraser experiment. You gotta remember all these fancy names. These experiments originate not from an invariant speed of light, but actually from the mass of light originating from this non-commutative time and frequency that's superluminal, and therefore enables this quantum information that's also anti-gravity, as shown in the weak measurement experiments. And Basil J. Hiley is working with Bob Flack, whom I also corresponded with, and they are testing argon. So by using entangled matter and not just a photon, then they're able to prove definitively that this is the non-commutativity originates from this deeper non-locality as non-commutativity. And so the quantum potential is actually powered, the force of it is due to the non-commutative time and frequency, and this doesn't have, because it's non-commutative, there's no need for a wave function. And this is Basil J. Hiley's big point to me, is that, by relying on a wave function, you're still trying to define some kind of ether of a medium that that doesn't explain this deeper profundity of non-locality being a fundamental time or primordial time that's the fifth dimension, because we exist within it as this superluminal protoconsciousness. And so it's an organic process, because whenever we make an external measurement, there's the future and the past have already overlapped and correlated the information. And so when we set up an experiment with the entangled matter along with the entangled photon, then we're able to demonstrate that the particle is actually being guided by the future as a non-local information from this non-commutative phase of the negative frequency and the positive frequency. And so that again is in the Quaternion mathematics as an algebraic process. And the simplest example is the music theory. And then that also is applied to the body as meditation. And this is what the small universe meditation is, and found in India in the Kriya Yoga practice, and also in the Pythagorean logos meditation that was the basis for the book of John in the Bible. And it's from Egyptian meditation. And so, and then it's originally from the San Bushman culture, our original human culture that then spread around the world. So this is the ancient original truth of human culture, is this secret of the holographic process being non-commutative. So I've talked for an hour, almost just under an hour, so I'm gonna leave it at that, and I will link the lecture on the Quaternions by the lady who gave a talk at some mathematical society. And as Roger Penrose said, consciousness is not a calculation from Gödel's incompleteness theorem. And so that's referring to a calculation being an external measurement. Whereas the non-commutative mathematics as fundamental time is pure thought that's neither internal nor external, because it exists before space-time. So it exists before linear time. So we'll leave it at that, and just had to get that off my chest, so to speak. And again, I want to thank all the professors that have corresponded with me over the past, ever since I got my master's thesis. So like I said, I don't do the calculations, but I focus on the consciousness aspect that then is, you can store the energy in the body, and then you can actually change space-time because of this meditation process. And that's the power of the, not just levitation, but also the healing, is actually this change of space-time also. And so I want to thank the spiritual healers that I trained with, that did the healing on me and other people I know, and they teach the healing and they practice the healing. And this is Jim Nance, who was the assistant of Chen Yulin. And I was just chatting with a new friend whom I met through my family, a family friend, about Wim Hof. The Wim Hof breathing method is actually based on this Tibetan yoga. And so that secret of the energy in the body originates from this deeper meditation process. And I thank people for checking out my Ancient Advanced Acoustic Alchemy book that has a comparison of the different small universe meditation as music applied to the body, as meditation, this listening process that then resonates the frequency of the body through the non-locality by turning the light around and then synchronizing it with your breathing and your thinking. And thank you very much.